Welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm John Kim.
And I'm Noelle Cordeau. We are the founders of Lumia.
And we're super passionate about all things coaching, and we want to share what we've learned from over a decade of coaching and training thousands of life coaches.
Let's dive into the science and magic of coaching.
On today's episode, how to build a better life through building better relationships.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's overwhelming. It's a lot. It's a heavy drop. The first thing in the morning.
It is. It is. So, I mean, I think it's kind of a good check-in and a good frame. When you think about relationships as someone whose life is completely subsumed by relationships, your work, home, your friends, how do you feel about them?
Yes. So the first thing, and I don't know if this is a good thing, is when I think about relationships, of course, I just think about intimate partner. And I don't think that's healthy because for half of my life, I never put any investment into friendships. I thought they were like extra, travel, friendships, when I become successful, then I will work on those things. I just want my one partner. And that was most of my 20s and 30s. And so when I got a divorce, I was standing there alone and thinking to myself, I spent no time or effort in other relationships other than my romantic partner. And I realized the consequences of that, And so today I noticed that when I hear the word relationships, I notice I go toward, my partnership, but then I stop myself and I say, wait a minute, what about your friends? What about your family? What about all the other relationships in your life, the relationship with your daughter, the relationship with your motorcycle? It can't just be your partner and you revolving, that being the sun you revolve around.
Yeah, I completely agree.
That's my first thought.
I completely agree. And my experience with relationships is literally the opposite of yours. It's like partner is in there for me. Sure, absolutely. But I'm so always consciously aware of how many relationships I have, work, friends, partners. It's like I am surrounded by an octopus's garden of humans at all times in my life.
Yes. And you know what? Vanessa's like that. And so I sometimes take it personally that I'm not the only relationship in her life.
Yeah. And so for me, when I look out into that expanse, it actually feels a little bit exhausting. That's one of the experiences that I have. And that might be a common experience with Vanessa too, how much time it takes to get up and tend to and deal with equality and negotiate all of the different relationships. But I think that they all have a different, role to play. Social construction, obviously, tells us that our intimate partner relationship is like the one, that we should all strive for. And then, we have these different rings of relationships. There's 3 rings of relationships. There's your inner, there's your middle, and then there's your outer.
Let's talk about each. I've never heard them in those terms. So, what would you define as the inner ring, and then the middle ring, and the outer ring? I'm imagining Saturn here.
Yeah.
Tell me your different. What's the difference? How do you define someone who's in your inner ring as opposed to your outer ring?
Well, it's interesting because it's completely subjective. It's completely subjective, and it's completely dependent on the person who's answering the question. So the inner ring would be folks that when you sit back and you really think about who are the most important people in my life. Like, who are the most important people to me in my heart and in my soul? They don't necessarily have to have a specified role in your life, but like, who are my VIPs? Those are your inner.
Okay.
That's your inner circle. And then when we're looking at the middle circle, that would probably be the friend group where there's like bubbles of connection. It feels good, 9 yards. This is Marley. Marley's joining us today.
Hey, Marley.
And then The outer ring.
Yeah, what is Marley in your inner, middle, or outer?
Marley's in my outer. He's working his way
Outer.
to the middle right now. It might become inner, by the time we're done hanging out. We'll see. But
If you're listening, Marley is a dog that is circling. It's funny, we're talking about rings, and Marley is circling Noelle, literally circling her as we're talking about rings and where Marley fits in Noelle's rings.
yeah, I've been playing with Marley and taking Marley on walks, and so we're in love.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
definitely there's a whole thing going on. But when we're looking at that middle ring, it's like, okay, there's the connection there. It does something for us. We get the dopamine. We might get the
Mm-hmm.
oxytocin, serotonin, and then the
Mm-hmm.
outer ring is social activity, social connections, and
Mm.
it's factual. Like, who are the people that you interact with? Like, you drop Logan off at daycare. The
Mm-hmm.
people who care for your daughter all day long that you engage with would be in your outer ring.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
That's interesting. Yeah. So, how does it help as far as going back to the title, how to have a better life by having better relationships? How does this model, having rings, contribute to that?
yeah. So we know from cross-disciplinary, so from positive psychology to anthropology, neurobiology, positive relationships are central to our well-being. And there's a consistent direct link between the investment that we put into positive social relationships and then the well-being scale. So essentially, the more we put in, the more we get out. And then the question becomes, well, what specifically do we get out of these relationships? Like, what happens when we engage in positive social relationships? And it's something called positive affect. There's also such a thing as negative affect. And positive affect is kind of a weird term. And, why do we care about this? Why do we care about it from a coaching perspective? Positive affect is a technical term, and it refers to emotions and the way that we experience and show our emotions, but very specifically, when we're experiencing and showing our emotions, how does this lead us to impact our decision making? How does it
Mm.
lead us to take action steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So positive relationships give us positive affect, which is
Mm-hmm.
the technical experience of our emotions, which leads to the way we take action in our lives and make decisions. It's a very causal link
Yeah.
between having people around you that you engage with well, feeling good, and being able to make decisions that are in your interest. So from a coaching perspective, I'm looking at this and I'm like, holy shit, like, this is foundational to goal accomplishment. If we're
Mm-hmm.
really thinking about the conditions that someone needs to set up in their life in order to have these experiences.
Yeah, I was thinking the rings model. I think it's simple and powerful, but just great when you're coaching people to kind of use that as a framework to get kind of test the temperature, to give me a snapshot of the people in your life. It almost reminds me of in therapy school, we used to do these giant family trees. I think they're called enneagrams. I
Yeah,
don't remember, but they're like these family,
yeah,
but it's visually laying out, whether you imagine it or it's on paper, your family tree, and when I think about the rings, and if I was coaching someone using that as a tool, oh, okay, I see this person is in this ring. You're laying out the important people in their lives and kind of where they fall as far as importance and
yeah.
effectiveness.
Absolutely. And it gets really nuanced. So people
Mm-hmm.
report increased well-being the more positive bubbles of connection that they have throughout their day. So, this
Yeah.
positive affect
Yeah.
that we're chasing, it includes cheerfulness, enthusiasm,
Mm-hmm.
energy, pride. So if we're just saying, okay, these are the outcomes that you get from positive social experiences, making sure that you have them lined up throughout your life is what's going to give you these little surges of energy to move forward with yourself.
Yeah, and here's what's tricky though, because all the people in your life, friends, family, it doesn't matter what ring they fall on, may not all be positive, may not all be in a good place, may be taking you hostage, all of that stuff.
That's super important. So there's a differentiator in the quality of the relationships, and so it's like there's an important study. It was done by a palliative care nurse named Bronnie Ware, and what she started doing was counseling folks in their very last days, in as alive people on this planet, and asking them what their biggest regrets were. And their biggest regrets were that they didn't spend enough time with the people on the inner circle of the ring, the people that they listed as the VIPs in their life. And there's a really special quality of connection that comes with those specific relationships. And most people spend most of their time in the middle and outer circles just because of the way that our lives are set up. So there's a different,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, quality of connection. So it's like those VIPs and making time for them are what give you that like deep cut of
Hmm.
life
Hmm.
satisfaction. And then in the middle, we need that middle engagement because of dopamine. So it's not, it's the quality, yes, but it's also the experience of social engagement itself that kind of gives
Hmm.
you those little bubbles. Um,
Mm.
so when you're sourcing this with clients and you're kind of doing that family tree and you're like spreading out the rings, there are two things that you want to look at. You want to look at both the quantity and the quality. Are you getting
Hmm.
enough positive engagement in the outer rings to give you that social activity? And are you getting enough investment on the inner rings to feel deeply connected to your life?
How do you think you know that you need to invest more in relationships? Is it feeling of isolation? Like how do you, I know it's probably different for everyone, but how do you gauge that? Like where you pause and you're like, you know what, I need to invest more in relationships because I feel like I'm getting whatever depressed or feeling alone or whatever.
Yeah, this is actually building on this body of work in terms of coaching exercises for coach and client. And it's this examination that you're talking about. So the work of coaching becomes to examine the closeness of the people in your social network and the discrepancies in where you're actually putting your time.
Hmm.
So taking a look and kind of doing like a time audit almost on those rings. Are you spending most of your time on the outside? Are you spending most of your time in the middle? Are you spending most of your
Hmm.
time on the inside? Most humans can tell you who their VIPs are and why they are those people to you, but
Yeah.
most people spend most of their time on the outside of the circle.
Why do you think that is? Is it because we take the people in our inner ring for granted, or is it because we don't want to be vulnerable, or is it because we just assume, when it comes to people close to us, they'll always be there? I don't want to spend time on. I want to spend time on getting more or a different crowd, or I'm talking about seeking approval, validation, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the empty calories of junk food. It's like it's
Mm,
accessible, it's plentiful. I'm just gonna snack
yeah,
in the Cheez-Its. I go to work every day. There are people there. I
yeah,
go to the gym. There are people there. So you're kind of
yeah.
just it's like almost like being asleep at the wheel in terms of your relationships. You're just engaging in whatever's around you without taking
Hmm.
into account the nutritional quality of what you're really bringing into your life. And what's I find fascinating is that Sandram and Dunn, that's the citation. There was a study that was done that if people are over investing in the outer layers
Hmm.
of their social network, it's going to negatively impact the emotional bond with people on the inside.
Ooh,
Right.
yes, yes. And why? Just because we only have so much time in a day?
Well, and even thinking about that nutritional quality, that nutritional punch, like if you're spending a lot of your time with people that you don't have deep social bonds with, like there's not a lot of intentionality there. Like your focus, your
Yeah,
attention is just being drawn to wherever it is. And just, anecdotally, like thinking like, oh, you might come home with a story of, so and so from the gym, and that's what's in your mind. But are you taking the time to ask your kid about their internal experience of the day?
right. This is the kind of person we all know, these kind of people who have a lot of friends, very social on the outside, very popular, but maybe lonely. They don't have a lot of close friends. So they have a lot of people in the outer ring, but not a lot in the inner ring.
And most people don't have a lot of close friends. Like the VIP list is short,
Mm,
and it's short
yeah,
for a reason because I call it
yeah.
the energetic scavenger hunt of life. It's like most people deeply connect with few people throughout the
Hmm.
course of their lifespan. And when we're doing this work with clients often forget that they have a choice when it comes to where they're investing their time and energy.
Yeah.
So, and the investment of time and energy is I think really important for examination here too, because you brought up the point of like, well, what if you're at work? What if you have to be around these people? And this is where really doing that energy audit comes in and looking at, well, how are your boundaries within like,
Mm,
your outer ring social groups? Do you feel an obligation to give everyone everything? Are you oversharing? Are you sitting there?
mhm,
Are you taking in somebody else's personal dump time and time again?
mhm.
Like what is like, do you have effective enough boundaries so that you're participating in the social activity of the outer ring, but you're not giving your whole self to it?
Yeah, and you know what I find is one of the most challenging with friendships. I always say that history alone isn't enough for a friendship, meaning that people change, we drift, and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, to maintain a friendship and the amount of work it takes, um, it's significant because people do change and people have different interests and people move around and there's so many variables that you know that one magical summer isn't enough. And it's like that with any relationship, of course, intimate as well. And so to juggle all of that plus career and everything you're trying to build, and then on top of that, if you have a child, I mean, sometimes Vanessa and I have to spend $100 just to get out of the house, let alone So it's like it's just hard to do. And as we grow up, it's also hard to make new friends. So that outer layer sometimes can be difficult.
Yeah, and you're making a great point about, how hard it feels and like that there are feelings involved in all of this navigation. And from a coaching perspective, when we're working on clients with this, one of the most important things to examine is the client's ability to observe and contend with these emotions that are coming up as a result of the interactions with people who are around you all the time, and to help the client establish internal boundaries in managing their own emotional set of frustration or desire, or like just feeling spun out or fed up, or like I can't listen to the guy in the cubicle next to me talk about his dog one more day, or I'm gonna like lose my mind. So it's like
Yeah.
acknowledging that there are energetic sucks, and then there are also needs that you have, and then figuring out how to self-soothe within that and express your
Mhm.
needs to the people around you with efficacy.
Yeah. I think also back in the day when we were more communal villages,
Mhm.
um, those outer rings were kind of built into our lives.
Yeah.
Today, we live in bubbles,
Mhm.
and so cars, elevators, cubicles. Uh, it takes so much more effort today to create friendships and put effort because they're not organically happening in our lives unless we extend ourselves. It seems like.
Yeah. And I think
Mhm.
a huge point that I want to bring into awareness is that having a healthy relationship doesn't mean that it's a friendship.
Yes.
That
Yes.
like that when we're talking about these outer rings and the people that you see every day and the people that you
Hmm.
engage with, these folks might be your colleagues, they might be your neighbors, they might be service providers. They're not your friends, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
looking at that and saying like, okay, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship? And as you described, like, you know, we can escape the village if we want at this point in time.
Hmm.
We can escape the
Hmm.
village on our phones if we're sitting in a
Hmm.
room full of people. We can pretend the village doesn't exist. And so what do we do with this in our human time? And what happens if we don't harness this awareness? And it's avoidance.
Yeah.
Avoidance is what shows up when you start to have these like pinpricks of I don't like the way it feels. I have to engage with this person. It's not healthy. It's sucking my
Hmm.
energy and my time. And then there's avoidance. It's phone. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
maybe um, being shitty to somebody so that they kind of back off a little bit.
Hmm.
It's all of
Hmm.
those like destructive and problematic behaviors that keep us from actually being in our own life container and saying, what does a healthy relationship look like with this human?
Yeah. I'm 50. So, I have one foot in the 80s. I have one foot in today. And I have realized that it's harder to make friends these days in the world that we live in because of the filters. So not just literal filters like social media filters, but all the filters, all the distractions, where our attention is. Because I remember in the 80s, you just went to summer camp and you come home with built-in lifelong friends. And speaking of this, what a great way into complementing Lumia, because although Lumia, we are doing a lot of stuff online, it does feel like summer camp. It does feel like the Breakfast Club. It does feel like with our common thread to help other people being what produces the stick and the glue, the diversity and all different walks of life. When you're coming out of this program, you do feel like you went somewhere and came back with someone. So um,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I, I put that in.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And so, it's like, I think for me, the threads here are, commonality and awareness.
Hmm.
And when you're coming into a program like Lumia, everybody's basically there with the same values and intention. They want to become good coaches. They want to understand
Hmm.
the values and ethics of the organization, right? So everybody has like,
But also hungry for. I think a lot of people are hungry for connection, and they don't even realize it.
oh, I think we're all starving for connection. I mean, that's the crux
Yeah.
of this conversation is like the number one thing when people are about to die that they're like, man, I wish I had spent more time with my close friends, right? Like,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
that's the thing. And like, where is our time going and who are we spending it with and who feeds us? And, there's an aspect of coping in there. And I think that that's what,
Hmm.
when we're looking at healthy relationships and also looking at healthy organizations that we might join or be a part of, that's
Hmm.
why Lumia feels so good, is because it's,
Yeah.
it's, it's a healthy organization that provides values aligned folks with a way to connect with others that they would never typically have access to, um, with ground rules around how you're supposed to engage as adult humans. And so it takes the guesswork out of, do I belong
Hmm.
here? Everyone belongs. And then you get ground rules for how to engage. And so there's no mystery around,
Yeah.
belonging and engagement.
Yeah. Feed two birds with one seed, and pursue life coaching, and also make lifelong friends.
I know. We did that with
Yeah.
intention though. Like the way that the
Yeah.
program was set up that way was really experimental to see
Hmm.
what would happen if we actually curated an environment for adults to make friends. Do you remember when I was on the kick of make friends be awesome?
Yeah. Yeah. The one of many T-shirts we were thinking about.
I know. And and it came true.
Yes, you manifested that. Uh, because I think that's kind of the heart of Lumia
Yeah.
is not only are you learning a craft, but you're also making authentic friendships, relationships, which is actually bettering your life. The title of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, what are your takeaways from today?
That I continue to need to put more effort into friendships. This is something that I get. I'm kind of a mad scientist. I get lost in my own world. I'm at the end of the day, I'm a loner. I've always been since I was 12, doing a lot of things by myself, closing the door and getting lost in my creations,
Yeah.
and that can be very lonely. So yeah, making an effort, whether it's I'm at the gym or I need to return calls or meet up with people, making that effort to um, build all my rings,
Yeah.
not just the one in the middle, but not just the one in the inner, but all three of them.
Yeah. Yeah, the intentionality is huge. And for me, I
Hmm.
guess kind of the opposite of you as somebody who does engage in a million relationships.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah,
it was really around the importance of looking at like energetic burnout from
yeah.
and really the role of like avoidance and coping with your emotions and like how
Mm,
you need to lock it down internally in
yeah,
order to just have healthy boundaries to be able to
sure,
coexist
sure.
socially with people on the outside of the ring and not have your boundaries overrun and not give too much so that you have
Hmm.
that time to invest in the inner circle.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're such great opposite extreme examples, because people listening or watching can be like, oh yeah, I may fall somewhere in the middle, but it's great they can see that there is diversity, and you and I are very different.
Always. It is. It's a
Always.
peanut butter and chocolate combo.
Yes. Well, thank you for listening. Be well. Check out Lumia. And if anything, just a reminder to reevaluate all your circles of your rings. And also, if you want to help other people, this is a great door, a foundational door into helping people enrich their lives.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Be well. Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to lumiacoaching.com/everything. Explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose, and a bold community to do it with.
Lumia is ready to equip you with the tools, training, and community you will need to reach your goals. If you're ready to build a unique coaching business on your own terms while making an impact on the world at large, Lumia is the next bold step in your coaching journey. That's lumiacoaching.com/everything.
And hey, if you're waiting for a sign, this is it.